Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I am back on Kerbal Space Program and I'm going to be attempting to launch a rocket, put a satellite into orbit and then land successfully in roughly about 10-mile radius away from the Space Center, both the first stage and the second stage. So basically the entire rocket apart from the fairings, I'm planning on landing intact back on Kerbin. So let's go and launch and see how we can do. So let's go. Okay, so she's up. Okay, rocket's got quite good acceleration. Hits Mach 1 by about 18 seconds, so pretty quick. If you've seen the video of my last reusable rocket, this is a far development from that. It's about twice the size with about 3 times the power. And generally it's just a lot quicker in every way. So I'm just going to put the parachutes up in a lower action group so they don't activate yet. The first stage will be landing via rocket-powered vertical landing, and the second stage will be landing via parachute, as the engine isn't powerful enough for vertical landing, as well as the fact that it's going to be re-entering the atmosphere, and plus I have to get it back from a full orbit after putting the satellite in. So yeah, it'll be quite difficult to do a vertical landing with that. And of course, all the fuel I take up for landing, I'm also going to have... so all the fuel for landing I have to take up, which of course lowers the cargo capacity, so I can't take too much fuel up. So not much fuel for the landings. Okay, so disconnecting that first stage. Small explosion there, happens on every launch. It's one of the heat shields that cover the sort of drone unit. So opening the air brakes and that, I'm just going to quickly unlock all the fuel, just so that at a later stage, when this is at the top of its sort of orbit trajectory, I can do a small burn to get it to land closer to the Space Center. So that's all ready. Okay, just going to change the guidance. There we go. Okay. Right, so just got to make sure all of that is correct. If it is, once it is, I can switch back over to the second stage. What I'm launching on this launch is just a small communication satellite, because I've started a new sort of new save, so I've transferred over my best vehicles, and what the plan is now to make a network of communication satellites which can then be used for later launches, so there's constant communication with the KSC. Okay, so hopefully this will get into orbit. I'm probably going to have to go into the reserve fuel, which is for the landing burn, although I have 4 tanks for the landing burn, and I only really need 1 of them. It depends, and you can sort of re-enter from anywhere on the orbit, but I'm going to try and get within sort of a small circle, sort of 10 miles in every direction from the Kerbal Space Center, which shouldn't be too difficult, but we'll see what we can do. Okay, so there is a point where once I sort of move into the orbit trajectory direction, it does slow down first and then accelerate just while the orbit gets sorted out, but still, it's quite quick. The satellite it's carrying is relatively small, so it should accelerate quite fast. So if you see on the sides where the fins are, it has also got 4 air brakes, and some parachutes just above that. They are for landing, so it re-enters the atmosphere around 2,200 meters per second. So once it gets below 1,600 meters per second, I'll open up the air brakes, and when it gets down to about 500 meters, I'll open the parachutes and land it. So not too difficult to land this one, but the main problem is you've got it in an orbit, and basically separate from the satellite, and then once you get to the position to deorbit, you can fire the booster for... all you really need is a few seconds just to get the orbit pattern down below the atmosphere, and that should be all good. Anyway though, I'm most likely, since this is the first time I've attempted this, I'm going to be trying to land most likely in the ocean near the KSC, just because that's a bit of a safer bet than landing on land. Just, I don't want it exploding or anything. Okay, so the orbit's opening up nicely. That should be good. I'm just going to jump back over to the first stage and just do the quick readjustment burn to get it to land at least relatively close to the KSC. Okay. Okay, there we go. Quick burn. Opening that up a little bit. you got to be very careful because it is quite, at this altitude, it's quite a small bit you're aiming for. So you don't want to end up in the ocean, but you also don't want to end up on the hilly ground. So hilly ground I can deal with because the rocket can land on that. Previous variants of this, the first stage that was used on this rocket had the 6 vector engines, and all of them were used for landing. The issue with that was the amount of power they produced. You would sometimes find yourself almost about to touch down, and then you'll go up again, and then you wouldn't be able to land because all your guidance systems would be mucked up, and you wouldn't be able to have enough fuel to go up properly. But what I've done on this variant is I've added a 7th vector in the center, which is only used for landing. There we go, in orbit. Okay, so now I can separate the satellite. But the idea with the final vector is you will use these 6 others just to slow down gradually, bit by bit. And then the final single vector will just be used for the final touchdown phase. Okay, so satellite's released. That should now be communicating with all the antennas are open. So that should now allow communication. The idea is I'll have multiple satellites around in different orbits, and they'll eventually mean that most spacecraft will be able to get their signals back to the KSC. Alright, just getting it lined up. So we're going to be going with a, we're basically going to be following the orbit pattern down backwards, and then when we get to about a few kilometers up, we're going to switch to just, actually I'll do it, yeah, I've done it now. We'll just switch straight to the, basically directly straight down, just so, because if we stay following the orbit pattern, when we slow down, it can turn out that the rocket is drifting slowly across, and that can be difficult for landing, as, well, these are the biggest landing legs in the game, I believe, and the problem with that is it's very easy for the rocket to fall over, so you need to be quite careful with that. But anyway, so that's the single central booster. I'm going to turn on and off the sort of main engines just to allow for a bit of a quicker deceleration. Although the advantage of using this one for most of the time is there's a lot of fuel saved, so you have more time to land. There you go, a bit of a burn there. Bit more. Okay. Probably have to do one more. There we go, just a quick burn. So I am drifting slightly, as you can see from the smoke plume. It's going to my side, so I am going to try to correct for that as much as I can, but it's likely I will have a slight bit of a bump. There we go, just a tiny bit there, just get a final slowdown. Okay, I'm sort of hovering. Okay. Come on. Okay, this is quite of a hill. I am close to the Space Center, but that's a bit of a hill. Oh, bit of a bounce there. Okay, be careful. Touchdown, engine off. Okay. Oh, don't fall, don't fall. Okay, there we go. Okay, I think that should be okay. The hill's not too bad. There are gyros inside, and it's got quite a bit of electric, so that should be okay until we recover it. Yeah, that looks good. Alright, let's... now that that's landed successfully, it hasn't fallen over, let's jump back to the second stage, and, well, we've released the satellite, so the idea is now we're going to attempt to get around and land it, which hopefully won't be too difficult, so, yeah. Basically, it's going to do 3/4 of an orbit, pretty much, and then we enter the atmosphere. So, and it's going to leave the communication satellite behind in orbit. Okay. Okay, so it's not going too badly. We're getting quite close to the position where I'm going to sort of start up the engine and do a burn just to lower its orbit down so that it's relatively close to the KSC, and then when I get closer to the Space Center, I will do 1 or 2 smaller burns just to get it a bit more precise. Okay, there we go. So it is now on land. Okay, looks like the first tank has run out. We used 2 of the tanks in the initial orbit, so what we're going to have to do, we only have 2 left, so I'm just going to use the last tank now just to, or use most of it at least, just to get the final orbit closer to this KSC. Okay, there we go. That's over the mountains at the moment. Just do a tiny bit more. Okay, there we go. Once I get closer, I'll try and lower that down to being a bit closer to the KSC, but landing in that sort of gulf in the ocean there, sort of to the side of the KSC, that isn't a problem. I can always build a boat to go and pick it up. Okay. So I'm going to set the guidance once I get a bit closer to re-entry, so that the top end of the second stage, where there's a heat shield, will re-enter first. And effectively also landing in the water, hopefully, I will touch down with the heat shield first, as I don't want to do any damage to the engine, which could be reused. Okay, so that continent is the continent opposite the Space Center, so going to pass over that, and then we'll be going in. Okay. Okay, so there is the Space Center. We can sort of see it now on the horizon. Getting a bit closer. Just doing a slight sideburn just to push that orbit down. Okay, so at the moment it looks like I am actually heading for the mountains, which shouldn't be too much of a problem, as it sort of descends at 6 meters per second with the parachutes open, at least in testing. I've done dropping it from about 2,000 meters, although I'm guessing the parachute descent isn't much different. Although the hope is during re-entry, the amount of drag produced and slowing down will eventually land it either on the land near the KSC or in that sort of Gulf area. Anyway, though, okay, so we're re-entering the atmosphere now. We are currently warping, just to speed up. Okay. Come on, I'm hoping this works. So there's the heat shield, looks to be holding up. I'm just going to sort of tap on and off the air brakes just to get a bit of extra drag. At this altitude it won't do so much, although it is sort of it does a bit, so it's good for getting us maybe in the water, which is where I hope to land this. It looks like we might actually end up within the sort of 10 mile range of the Space Center, which would be very good if we can do that, but have to wait and see. Come on. Okay, we're now getting some very rapid deceleration. Okay, I'm going to fully open the air brakes now. Actually, no, wait a minute. It's going to... Nah. Okay, I won't open. I'm going to let it fall a bit, because it looks like we are actually in a pretty good location. So if I'm just going to... Okay, there we go. So we'll fall like this for a bit, just as it makes it a bit more stable. And then once we get low and open the parachutes, there we go. Okay. Right, so parachutes are ready to go. I just need to put them into the correct action group, and then once that's done, we should be able to open them up and land in the water. Okay. Okay, let's chuck them in that action group. There we go. So this thing's completely out of fuel. I believe the first stage still had a little bit of fuel left. This is completely out. Returning from orbit from launching a satellite, which is really good. So the two most expensive parts of the rocket have been saved completely, which I'm very happy with. So there we go, opening the parachutes. A bit of a close call there. Only 81 meters to spare there, but that's not too bad. So anyway, there we go. Basically 95% of the rocket has landed successfully back on the planet, and the satellite is in orbit successfully. So yeah, so I'm pretty happy with that overall. So, yeah, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like, maybe even subscribe to the channel. I think this went quite well. We're actually quite close to the Space Center, as you can see. So, yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.